hello, and welcome back to day 17 of 100 days of clarity. For all intents and purposes, though, this is day 2 for us as we are now working through our first real smart contract, the community hello world. And so while yesterday we spent the majority of the lesson reviewing the process of how we write clarity contracts, we also spent a good amount of time describing the contract, outlining the sections we need, and figuring out the constants and variables we need. The next step here when working on contracts is to figure out the functions that we need and the logic that'll go within them. Not necessarily writing them all out, as that's the most exhausting part. Today, it's much more about strategic thinking, making sure we're covering all edge cases, and being very careful before writing our functions. I do want to add one more thing. Today we're going to be reviewing read and write functions. It's not uncommon that read functions, since they can usually be condensed to 1 or 2 lines, that we'll implement them today. Write functions, since they require multiple steps and multiple edge cases, will not be written today. Those will focus on outlining comments. So with that being said, let's open back up our terminal and go to the section that says read functions. Okay. With this open, let's think through what read functions we'll need. We know for a fact that we need anyone to read the community billboard. So we know we need that function. So we need get community billboard. And again, we know this is a define read only function that we only need to var get one variable. And so you should know how to do this by memory now. Enter, indent, var. Whenever you want to get a variable, var get. What variable do we need? Well, we want the billboard. Save. Straightforward. Next, we know that, if we're the next user, we need to know that we're going to be the next user, right? So we should write another read only that just lets us know who the next person is going to be. So get next user. And we'll go ahead, another read only, get next user. And you should know how to do this in the body, so I'm not going to review it verbally. Okay, and those two functions, if we go ahead and try Clarinet Console now, first off, we see that this new contract was spun up, hello world, and we do see these two functions, get billboard and get new user. So with those in mind, let's go ahead and test them out. Again, we don't need Clarity Basics 2. We are now working in a new contract, community hello world. And first, we're going to call get billboard. Awesome. We see that it does indeed return the current billboard, new username, new user principal. Next, we're going to call get next user. And again, we set this to TX sender, so we expect it should be the same principal that it shows above. Okay, and indeed it does. So cool, with that done, we know the two read functions we need. Now we can start focusing on our write functions and the lines of logic we'll need within the write functions. Cool. So one, we know that we're going to need a function for the new user to update the billboard. Okay, that's one. We know that we're going to need a function for the admin to set the new user. Okay, so that's 2 functions. And so far, I don't think there's any other immediate write need. But again, this is why we first outline these and write in functions, because we're not sure what we're missing quite yet. So let's go ahead, go to the write functions. And again, here I use comments even more verbose, because again, there's nothing more tragic than working really hard on a project and then coming back 10 days later with absolutely no idea of what you wrote and why. So write function, well, we know we need new user update billboard. let's call the function name update billboard. What is the description of the name? Sorry, description of the function. Function used by next user to update the community billboard. Okay. And again, the second comment here is first description, then parameters. What parameters do we need? Well, we actually don't need the principal. We actually don't need a principal parameter because we're going to save as txsender. But we do need the new user's name, right? So we know a parameter we're going to need is new username. And since we defined new username as a string ASCII of 24, we need to define this as a string ASCII of 24 as well. Okay, and so now let's actually outline this function. Again, not write it. We know it needs to be a public because we're writing something. We're going to call it update billboard, and we know we need one parameter. I realize the tuple key is new username, so for the parameter, I'm going to call it updated username, and then just call that string ASCII, and then define it as a string ASCII 24. Okay, then enter for the body. Again, since we're writing a defined public function, we know it's going to give us an error if we don't write OK at the last line. So as a placeholder, just write in OK true. And now let's start commenting. What do we need here? Well, first, we need to make sure that the person calling, that the txsender or the principal is equal to the next user, aka the admin gave them permission. So whenever we need to check that something is true, and if it's not, absolutely fail out, an error out, we know we need to use an asserts. So comment here, assert that txsender is next user, aka approved by admin. I don't think it's how you spell approved, but you know, I'm not going to check that while we're recording this. We also know we also need to check. Let's check that the new username is not an empty string, right? That would be weird. So assert that updated username is not empty. Okay, and if both of those are true, then we know we're going to need to update this tuple. And so we're actually going to var set it. Var set billboard with new keys. And that should be all the steps we need for updating the billboard function. Again, we're not 100% certain, but just taking the time to step through each step before writing it will give us time to take a step back, view this function in conjunction with the rest of the contract, and realize if there is anything else we are missing. So the next function that we know we're going to need is not update billboard, but admin set new user. And the description of that should be fairly straightforward. It's a function used by admin to set or give permission to next user to update the billboard, of course. And so parameter, really simple. All we need is a principal, right? The new user. New user, let's call it updated again. Updated user principal. And we know this needs to be of type principal. Okay, so let's go ahead and, again, not implement, but outline this function. Define public, admin set new user. And then for the body, actually, let's go back to the last function. I just realized I missed this. This is a function with multiple steps. when you have a function with multiple steps, again, it can't be standalone. It needs to be wrapped with either begin or let. Right now, we're still using begin because we haven't covered let. Okay, and we need to do the same thing for this function down here. Begin. And again, for a placeholder, we need to have OK true at the bottom of any public function since they expect response types. And now let's outline here. Okay. Well, what do we need to assert? We need to assert that the admin doesn't set the new user to admin again, right? So principal is not equal to admin. On that same vein, we also need to obviously check that the person calling this is admin. So principal param, or actually, yeah, we need to update this param, updated user principal of type principal. So first, updated type principal, so updated user principal, our parameter is not equal to admin. And before that, we also probably just want to check, hey, is the admin writing this? So again, whenever we need to check something where the fail scenario means it exits out, it means we need to assert. Assert that TX sender is admin. And assert that updated user principal is not is not admin. Okay. And that should be good. We can also, actually, I guess we can just check that the assert that we're not going to update to the existing. We're not going to update and repeat the existing user principal, right? So if like, you know, we don't want to submit a parameter that's going to reset to next user. So assert that updated user principal is not current next user. Okay, awesome. And we know that if all three of those asserts pass through, then we should be ready to update our new user, or update the next user. And so that's going to be the very last line, var set next user with updated user principal. And that's it for today. As you saw, we wrote in our get read only functions. We outlined our we outlined our write functions, and we took the time to step through them, think through all the edge cases that we're going to have to check against. And again, take the rest of the day to think about some of this. Maybe there's an edge case we missed, etc., etc. And so take the rest of the day, have this in the back of your mind, think if there are any other steps we are missing, and I will see you tomorrow for when we actually implement all of these core functions in this community hello world contract. Again, you made it to day 17. Congrats. We are now actually probably halfway through your first smart contract. So congrats. Keep coming back, and I will see you tomorrow.